What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the Emerald Crusader live stream. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. A couple things I want to mention really quick. One, sorry about missing Monday. That's my bad. I just had something pop up and had to take care of it. But I will be back next Monday for another episode of Music Monday. 2, I'm wearing glasses. Yes, sometimes I wear glasses to help me read. 3, I am very excited for today because last Wednesday I didn't get a chance to launch this series. But as far as I'm aware, there's no impending civil war today that I'm aware of, at least. So with that said, let's start the series that I am calling Willpower Wednesday. So, for those of you who don't know, Emerald Crusader is another name for Green Lantern. And he was always one of my favorite superheroes growing up. I don't think I realized when I was younger, but more around when I was a teenager, that his power isn't the ring. His power is his willpower. That's what drew the ring to him in the first place, and that's he uses the willpower to manifest things with the ring in real life. And the stronger your willpower is, the better you are with the ring. That's why he's one of the best Green Lanterns of the whole Green Lantern Corps. But that being said, because he was such a huge influence on me growing up, I wanted to dedicate one day a week on this channel talking about willpower, inspiring and motivating both myself and others to develop and exercise our own wills. We all have habits, good ones that we want to start, bad ones that we want to break. We all have goals that we want to achieve. We all have plans that we want to execute on. And so I wanted to do Willpower Wednesday, which is going to be a half an hour story about either someone with a huge amount of or a tremendous feat of willpower. But when I was going through the interwebs and trying to find one of those willpower stories, I came across this article from positivepsychology.com by psychologist Katrina Leno, and it's titled "The Psychology of Willpower: Training the Brain for Better Decisions." And after reading this article, I thought, what better opportunity to take for the first Willpower Wednesday to really break down and define what willpower is and why it's so important. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. What is willpower? Generally speaking, willpower is the self actively and consciously regulating the self. It has a couple of other definitions by the American Psychological Association, such as the ability to delay gratification and resist short-term temptations to meet long-term goals, the capacity to override an unwanted thought, feeling, or impulse. And this last one is particularly interesting, at least to me, because it's not something that I ever associated with willpower, but something that they define it as is a limited resource that is capable of being depleted. So keep that in mind, because I want to talk about that later. But really quick, I want to talk about why willpower is important. So multiple studies on willpower have shown that people with greater willpower are generally happier, they're healthier, they're more satisfied in their relationships, further along in their respective career fields. They're also better at managing stress, dealing with conflict, overcoming adversity. But something else that's also interesting from these studies that some people misunderstand about willpower is that we all have it and use it to some extent, and that it's not exactly a fixed character trait or anything like that, but it's actually more like a skill that can be practiced and improved upon. So that's neat, but I want to further define willpower. I want to peel back another layer on this onion and keep breaking it down. So this person here is psychologist Kelly McGonigal, and she is the author of The Willpower Instinct. And in this, she breaks down willpower into 3 different categories. That is the I won't power, the I will power, and the I want power. So with that said, let's listen to a brief excerpt from her audiobook.
When you think of something that requires willpower, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, the classic test of willpower is resisting temptation. Whether the temptress is a donut, a cigarette, a clearance sale, or a one-night stand. When people say, "I have no willpower," what they really mean is, I have trouble saying no when my mouth, stomach, heart, or fill in your anatomical part, wants to say yes. Think of it as I won't power. But saying no is just one part of what willpower is and what it requires. After all, just say no are the 3 favorite words of procrastinators and couch potatoes worldwide. At times, it's more important to say yes. All those things you put off for tomorrow or forever, willpower helps you put them on today's to-do list, even when anxiety, distractions, or a reality TV show marathon threaten to talk you out of it. Think of it as I will power, the ability to do what you need to do, even if a part of you doesn't want to. I will.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty funny line when I was writing this too.
Are the 2 sides of self-control, but they alone don't constitute willpower. To say no when you need to say no, and yes when you need to say yes, you need a 3rd power, the ability to remember what you really want. I know, you think that what you really want is the brownie, the 3rd martini, or the day off. But when you're facing temptation or flirting with procrastination, you need to remember that what you really want is to fit into your skinny jeans, get the promotion, get out of credit card debt, stay in your marriage, or stay out of jail. Otherwise, what's going to stop you from following your immediate desires? To exert self-control, you need to find your motivation when it matters. This is I want power. Willpower is about harnessing the 3 powers of I will, I won't, and I want to help you achieve your goals and stay out of trouble. As we'll see, we human beings are the fortunate recipients of brains that support all of these capacities. In fact,
so I thought that was a really neat breakdown of willpower, and to briefly summarize, she says that your I want and your I will, or I'm sorry, your I won't and I will power act as your self-control, and they help you navigate as you try to get to your I want, which is your long-term ambitions. So essentially your I want acts as a guiding compass, and your I will and I won't power are how you navigate short-term decisions to your long-term goals. So I thought that was pretty cool, but that ain't enough for me. I want to keep peeling back them layers. I want to get down to the chemistry and the biology of willpower. So let's talk about your brain on willpower. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain right behind your forehead and your eyes, highlighted in the picture here. And while the rest of the brain has grown 3 times bigger in the last 5 million years, the prefrontal cortex has grown about 6 times. And this makes a lot of sense because we are very social creatures, and the prefrontal cortex is responsible for a lot of things like abstract thinking, analyzing thoughts, what we pay attention to, how we express personality, how we feel. the prefrontal cortex, for a lot of people, how they define themselves is essentially who we are. And the prefrontal cortex is also responsible for regulating behavior, which, if you'll recall from the basic definition of willpower, that's essentially willpower, is regulating your behavior. So they've actually been able to pinpoint the different areas where the I won't, the I will, and the I want power come from in the prefrontal cortex. They say that on the right side of the prefrontal cortex is the I won't power, the left side handles the I will power, and the lower middle handles the I want power. So to see how the prefrontal cortex affects and controls willpower, let's talk about the strange case of one Phineas Gage. So Phineas Gage was a 25-year-old foreman working the railroad, and he was having a really rough day one day. A large wrought iron over 1 meter long went right through his head, piercing and damaging his prefrontal cortex. And to everyone's surprise, after being unconscious for only about 3 minutes, he got up and started walking and talking almost as if nothing was wrong. And he was conscious through the whole 3-hour ride to the doctor's office, and actually went on to live for 12 years after the accident, but not without significant and permanent damage to his prefrontal cortex. So let's listen to a brief quote from his doctor on how this damage to his prefrontal cortex affected his personality and his willpower.
In 1868, in a report published in the Bulletin of the Massachusetts Medical Society, Dr. Harlow wrote, "His contractors, who regarded him as the most efficient and capable foreman in their employ previous to his injury, considered the change to his mind so marked that they could not give him his place again. He is fitful, irreverent, indulging at times in the grossest profanity, which was not previously his custom, manifesting but little deference for his fellows, impatient of restraint of advice when it conflicts with his desires, at times pertinaciously obstinate yet capricious and vacillating, devising many plans of future operation, which are no sooner arranged than they are abandoned, in turn for others appearing to be more feasible. In this regard, his mind was radically changed, so decidedly that his friends and acquaintances said he was no longer Gage. Not the same man,
So yeah, that's how his doctor described his personality after he recovered from the accident. And you can hear that he was giving into his base animal instincts, so there was clear impairment to his I won't power. And also you could tell that his long-term ambitions were blurry at best. I mean, he was often going from one to the next, implying some significant damage to the I want power of his willpower, and just how that made him a completely different person to who he was prior to the accident. But although his state was the state that impacted his will was a physical one, there are a number of states that can inhibit your willpower, such as being drunk, being sleep deprived, anxiety or stress, even being overly distracted can inhibit your willpower. Any one of these states can lead to a focus on impulse rather than long-term goals. So with that, we're kind of getting a little bit of a theme of our impulse always fighting our will, and a lot of neuroscientists have described it as everyone having what's referred to as two people living in their brains. One of these people seek instant gratification. The other person considers delayed gratification for long-term goals. The part of the brain that's responsible for the impulsive desire is referred to as the primitive brain. This is composed of the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the amygdala. A clash between the willpower coming from the prefrontal cortex and the impulsive desire from the primitive brain is referred to as a willpower challenge. And in these willpower challenges, one has to overpower the other. The best display of this dichotomy living within ourselves, and also possibly one of the cutest studies done in psychology, is something called the marshmallow experiment. So before we go into this, let's just watch a quick video of a dad trying the marshmallow experiment on his son.
Here's marshmallows. I'm gonna give you one right now, okay?
Okay, why?
You can eat it, but if you wait until Daddy comes back downstairs, because I have to go upstairs, Daddy will give you another one. You get 2 marshmallows if you wait. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you one now. You can eat it if you want to, but if you don't eat it, when I come back downstairs, I see you still have this marshmallow, Daddy will give you another one, and you get 2. Okay? Got it? Okay? So you can choose if you want to eat it or you want to wait, and I'll give you another one. I'll be right back, okay?
Spread, spread, spenny, spread, spenny, spenny, spread, spenny. Marshmallow, marshmallow, marshmallow. Daddy, different and a whip off and a can organic. Oh, my can go organic, organic. Uka iku akiki.
Oh, I can't even look at it.
To go to school. Wow, how do you do that?
Defeated.
Too late. Too late. Too late. Too late to go to school. Hooyah, hooyah, hooyah. Daddy! Come here! Come here! Come here, please. Come here, please.
Your sniffles, he's about to start
Okay.
crying.
You still have the marshmallow?
Yeah.
Oh, good job. Okay, here, hold on. What, you waited. How come you didn't eat it?
Because of this wasn't like 2.
You want another one?
Yeah.
Did you want to eat that one though?
No.
You don't want to eat that one right now?
Yeah.
Okay, well you did a good job, so you get 2 now. Okay?
Okay.
There you go. You can eat them now.
So that's the marshmallow experiment. In the classic willpower study, Walter Mischel, or Michel, I think is how you pronounce it, now a psychologist at Columbia University, set out to study self-control in children. Michel and colleagues presented preschoolers with a plate of marshmallows. Each child was then told that the researcher had to leave the room for a few minutes, and if they waited until their return, the child could have 2 marshmallows. But if the child couldn't wait, then they could ring the bell, the researcher would immediately return, but they could only eat 1 marshmallow. So the dad kind of messed up the experiment because he didn't really set a time limit for his kid, and the kid yelling for him was essentially him ringing the bell, but he gave him the marshmallow anyway. But it was still a very good presentation of the internal struggle between the kid's primitive brain wanting him so badly to just take a big old bite of that marshmallow. At one part, him even looking at the camera asking how to do this, and then the other side of him, his prefrontal cortex, just reminding him that if he didn't bite into that marshmallow, he would get that second marshmallow. Something interesting about the original study that they did is years later, the researchers followed up with the kids and found that the children who waited for the second marshmallow were generally faring better in life, scoring higher SATs and overall having a lower body mass index over 30 years after the study. Him and his colleagues developed a framework around this study that they referred to as the hot and cool system. And in this framework, your cool system is essentially your prefrontal cortex that does the cognitive thinking and reminds you about the second marshmallow. And your hot system is your primitive brain that is impulsive and emotional and responsible for how you react to certain triggers. This system is meant to explain how impulse can override the will. When something in your environment sets off a trigger, say seeing someone smoking a cigarette or smelling a basket of French fries, or even something as mundane as the warmth of your comforter as your alarm clock is going off for work, any one of those things activates your hot system, leaving your cool system to the task of talking you out of whatever impulse or desire that has popped up and back into the direction of your long-term goals. If you look at it like a kitchen fire, your hot system is the fire and your cool system is your fire extinguisher. So we have the fire extinguisher, but how exactly do we know when there is a fire? Well, let's talk about self-awareness. Most of our choices are made on autopilot without any awareness of what is really driving them. When asked in a survey, the average participant estimated that they make about 14 food choices per day. In reality, if you carefully tracked all of your food decisions, the real average is about 227 choices in a day. And that's just about food. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize what we're doing as we're doing it. In an era where distraction and overstimulation is just around every corner, it is harder to be aware of all of our decisions now more than ever. Studies have found that distracted people are more likely to give into impulse. Tug, what are you doing? Hey, boy. Sorry, we're getting a brief interruption from Tug. A distracted shopper. Hey, speaking of distractions, I know. Here, take it. Go lay down. I'm doing something. We'll play in a bit. I love you, buddy. Go on. Good boy. A distracted shopper in a store is more likely to be affected by in-store promotions and by things that weren't on their original shopping list. To play into the fire extinguisher metaphor, your self-awareness is effectively like your smoke alarm. So let's talk about some fire hazards. So one of the fire hazards that we can remove from the situation to try and prevent fires is temptation. When your brain is in a reward-seeking mode, it releases a chemical called dopamine. When your system is flooded with dopamine... I'm sorry, I gotta put him out of the room. Hold on one second, guys. Come on, boy. Go on. There's a good... Let's hope in 10 minutes he doesn't start barking at something. But we're going to try it. So, dopamine. When your system is flooded with dopamine, impulse desire is amplified, leaving you less concerned with your long-term goals. This is why when men see things like erotic images or other things of that nature, they're more likely to make financial risks. This is why fantasizing about the lottery has been linked to making people overeat. Subliminal environmental cues create tempting environments. The best way to minimize these temptations is by avoiding them altogether. But when you can't avoid them, and inevitably, as all of us do, when you falter, it is also important not to beat yourself up about it, because guilt can also be a pretty big fire hazard. So, in contrast with common sense, guilt and shame, more often than not, lead to overindulging rather than the desired change that they seek. Feeling bad makes it harder to resist temptation because it makes us want to cover our shame and guilt with instant gratification. This is why it's a cliche in movies for people to be eating with a pint of ice cream whenever they're sad. In a study, two groups of women were told that they would be participating in two different experiments. One would be an experiment on how food affects mood, and the other one would be a taste test. Each woman in both groups were given a donut and a full glass of water, and they did that to ensure that all of the women in the experiment felt full and possibly maybe even slightly a little uncomfortable. So before moving forward with what the women thought was the taste test, a researcher went into one group of women and encouraged them not to be too hard on themselves. They said things like, everyone strays from the path now and then, but that's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. And the other group of women didn't receive any message whatsoever. Both groups of women were presented with a plate of candy and told to eat as many as they would like for the taste test. The group of women that got the message of self-forgiveness ate a total of 28 grams of candy. The other group of women ate about 70 grams of candy, almost 3 times as much as the other group of women. This and many other studies similar to it seem to have proved their hypothesis. If guilt and shame decrease willpower, self-control and forgiveness and positive affirmation can increase willpower. So you have fire alarms, you've cleared away fire hazards, you put out all the fires, but remember what the American Psychological Association said about willpower being a limited resource that can potentially run out. What happens when you've put out so many fires that your extinguisher runs out? Let's listen to a short bit of a video that talks about different ways your willpower can be drained and different ways of replenishing it.
It has to be noted that willpower is like a battery. When used, it slowly gets depleted. You can see that on college campuses during the final exam period. Students fill their heads with facts and formulas, pull all-nighters and push themselves to study hard. However, studies show that these efforts come at a cost. During the final exams, many students seem to lose the capacity to control anything other than their study habits. They seem to smoke more cigarettes and have more emotional outbursts. They skip showering and rarely make an effort to change clothes. Dear God, they even stop flossing. People who use their willpower seem to run out of it. And that's not all. Trying to control your temper, stick to a budget, or refusing that slice of cake all draw from the same source of strength. This means that if you turn down the dessert, you'll be more likely to get angry. And if you manage to control your anger, you're more likely to overspend and not stick to your budget. Scary. But if willpower is limited, are we doomed to fail at our goals? Luckily, there are things you can do to overcome your willpower exhaustion and increase your self-control. Willpower is the highest in the morning and slowly degrades over the course of the day, almost like your phone battery. However, if you want your willpower to be full in the morning, you need to get some quality sleep first. If you are surviving on less than 6 hours of sleep a night, there's a good chance you don't even remember what it's like to have your full willpower. Being sleep deprived makes you more susceptible to stress, cravings, and giving in to temptation. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is what you should be getting to get your willpower fully recharged. One of the reasons sleep is critical for self-control is because your brain requires blood glucose as fuel. Especially the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. This brain region has been associated in controlling behavior and decision making. When we don't get enough sleep, our prefrontal cortex gets sluggish and less responsive. It's almost the same as being drunk, and if you ever had too much to drink, you know you don't make the wisest decisions. However, the brain scans show that when the sleep-deprived participants catch a better night's sleep, they no longer show signs of prefrontal cortex impairment. So while lack of sleep can impair the prefrontal cortex, there's a way to actually increase its size and efficiency. The answer is slow breathing meditation. People who meditate just 10 minutes a day build gray matter in their prefrontal cortex, and after a couple of months their brains look different. But why slow breathing? The reason is it increases our heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is a variation in the time interval between heartbeats. To exert self-control, the heart rate has to go down, but the variability needs to go up. Studies have shown heart rate variability starts increasing as the breathing rate drops below 12 breaths per minute. For best results, you have to slow down breathing to 4 to 6 breaths. It's slower than you normally breathe, but it's not too difficult with a little bit of practice. Slowing the breath down helps shift the brain and body from a state of stress to a relaxed self-control mode. A few minutes of this technique will make you feel calm, in control, and capable of handling your challenges. If you're on a diet, it's a good idea to practice slowing down your breath before you start looking at that slice of cake. In one study where they were experimenting with a new treatment for enhancing self-control, 2 researchers were stunned by their findings. While they had hoped for positive results, nobody predicted how effective the treatment's effects would be. After just 2 months of treatment, the participants in the study showed improvements in attention and ability to ignore distractions. They also reduced their smoking, drinking, and caffeine intake, despite the fact that nobody had asked them to. They were eating less junk food and more healthy food. They were spending less time watching television and more time studying. They were saving money and spending less on impulsive purchases. What is this miracle drug and where can I get a prescription? The intervention wasn't a drug at all. The willpower miracle was physical exercise. The participants who never exercised regularly before the intervention were given a free membership to a gym and encouraged to make good use of it. They exercised an average of just 1 time per week for the first month, but were up to 3 times per week by the end of the 2-month study. The researchers didn't ask them to make any changes in their lives, and yet the exercise program improved self-control in all aspects of their lives. Exercise turns out to be the closest thing to a wonder drug that self-control scientists have discovered. It also increases heart rate variability, which we talked about earlier. If you tell yourself that you're too tired to exercise, start thinking of exercise as something that restores your energy and willpower, not drains it. Now let's say you decide to quit smoking. Everything is going great for a week or so, but then you suddenly find yourself with a cigarette in your hand. Maybe you felt stressed, maybe you just weren't thinking, who knows? It's best to be self-critical about it, right? Feeling guilty that you lit that cigarette will surely remind you not to do it next time. Well, the problem is that guilt is driving people back to the very thing they want to avoid. After all, what do you do when you feel bad? You do something that reduces the bad feeling. Usually that's the very thing you want to quit, so it's no wonder alcoholics want another drink, smokers want to light a cigarette, and dieters want to eat another slice of cake. Remember, everyone is bound to fail sooner or later, so it's important how we respond to this slight setback. Rather than telling yourself things like, "Why did I do that again? I'm so stupid. I'm never going to change. Start talking to yourself in a second person, as if you were talking and giving advice to a good friend. Basically say to yourself, you know what? This is the process of change. Sometimes we fall off the wagon. Everyone is imperfect. So after a willpower failure, it's better to encourage yourself rather than criticize. After all, you're only human.
So I thought that was a awesome video that actually is a brief summary on the Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal, and that is by channel Better Than Yesterday. Go give them a like and subscribe because they do excellent work. So as the video said, there's a lot of different ways to recharge your willpower, but there's a few that it didn't touch on that I wanted to mention. So one is improve your self-awareness. Something you can do to improve your self-awareness is write down all your decisions as you go about a given day. Then at the end of the day, go through that list of all the decisions you made and determine which ones brought you closer to your long-term goals and which ones took you further away from your goals. This will not only help you make better conscious decisions and just be aware of the decisions that you're actively making, but it will also help you identify ones that, all in all, after you analyze them, actually move you further away from your goal. Something that you think might have been a positive might be a negative, or vice versa. Another thing that you can do is meditate. Meditation is one of the best ways to train your brain for self-control. I cannot say how good meditation is for you enough. This is because when you meditate, you are training your mind to focus on a given point. Kind of like training yourself to focus on a long-term goal. Paying attention to this point while observing thoughts, emotions, and impulses as they pass by, but not acting on them or identifying with them, but rather analyzing them and eventually pulling your attention back to your given focal point. This is practicing so many things related to willpower all at once, from attention to focus to stress management to impulse control, all the way to self-awareness. Meditation can be done in smaller scale than people realize. As the video said, you can just do a couple of minutes of breathing, 4 to 6 minutes. Even the next time you're in grocery line, if you have a chance that can allow it, then just take 5 to 10 very deep breaths, and if you can, focus on your breathing. The benefits of this were discussed in the video, and so I highly recommend meditating. There's great apps that you can use along with a ton of YouTube videos for guided meditation. The app that I use is called Insight Timer. It's excellent. It's basically a streaming platform for a bunch of different people that record guided meditation or make music specifically geared toward meditation, and they have all kinds of lengths from 2 minutes to 3 hours. You can just listen to music. You have spiritual guided meditation, you have meditation for going into work, meditation for getting off from work. It's great, and I again, it's called Insight Timer, and I highly recommend it. Another thing also mentioned in the video is exercise. Some things that weren't mentioned in the video about exercise were consistency is much more important than intensity. Just doing it is much more important than what you're doing. And also, working out outdoors has been found to be better for decreasing stress, improving mood, and enhancing self-control and focus all around. Another thing you can do is eating right. There is someone named Roy Baumeister. He's the social psychologist that developed the theory of willpower depletion. And he says that from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep, we use willpower, and like a muscle, that willpower gets tired and needs fuel. One of his studies he brought subjects to a room and sat them down at a table with cookies and radishes on it. Some were asked to try the radishes, others were asked to eat the cookies. After they ate, they were asked to solve a complex geometric puzzle, given only 30 minutes to do so. The ones that had radishes gave up the puzzle in just 8 minutes. The ones that had cookies lasted about 19 minutes. This implied that drawing on their willpower to resist the cookies drained them of their self-control during the following task. This and many studies like it have linked the depletion to glucose levels in the brain. Glucose is our body's fuel for energy, basically, and our brain actually uses a lot of it when we exercise willpower. This drop in glucose can lead to a state of alert trying to get back to a normal blood sugar level. This is why we get cranky and moody and become more impulsive and less self-aware. Other studies have shown that sugar, particularly high fructose corn syrup, can make your stress levels increase, triggering mental health problems like anxiety and depression. What you can do to combat this is to try to eat more whole foods, not the Amazon-owned Whole Foods, although they have them there, but specifically just whole natural foods as opposed to refined sugars. This will help keep your glucose levels stable, leaving you better ready to face any willpower challenges. So it'll help the glucose levels dip just a little less the next time you put a strain on your willpower if you just try to eat more whole fruits and vegetables and grains and whatnot instead of just cane sugar and corn syrup and all that kind of nasty stuff. Another way to recharge, and this is important, is relax. When you are stressed, your sympathetic nervous system takes over. This is the system that is responsible for your fight or flight response. The importance of variability in your heart rate was discussed in the video. When you are in your fight or flight state, your heart rate goes up, but your variability goes down, leading to physically feeling anxious and sometimes even angry. When you are in a relaxed state, your parasympathetic nervous system takes over. This is often referred to as the rest and digest system, not to be confused with the rest and vest system of Silicon Valley. Although very similar, they are different. When this system takes over, your heart rate decreases, your variability increases, and there are longer pauses between the beats. The study found that recovering alcoholics are more likely to stay sober if when they see a drink, their heart rate variability is high, meaning that they're in a calm, relaxed state. People with higher heart rate variabilities often do better at ignoring distractions, delaying gratifications, and coping with stress, all three things strongly related to your willpower. It is a good predictor of who will give in to temptation and who will exert willpower. In a 2010 survey by the American Psychological Association, they found that 75% of people in the United States report high levels of stress. Americans are also more and more sleep deprived, leading to us having poor self-control and focus. Lack of sleep can create impulse control and attention problems similar to attention deficit disorders and hyperactivity disorders. This drains our energy and compiling stress that steals our ability to self-control. The stress will force our brains into a reward-seeking state. Whatever you think will make you happy at the moment will become the fixation until you find yourself craving whatever the brain believes will make you feel better. This is why people who are stressed are more likely to reach for that cigarette, grab that drink, pull into that fast food drive-thru. According to the American Psychological Association, the most common stress coping strategies that are the least effective are as follows: gambling, no; smoking, Playing video games turns out not so great for you. Surfing the internet, watching TV and movies for more than 2 hours. Those last three seem like a personal indictment, but they are not great stress coping mechanisms. Good stress coping mechanisms, however, are, as discussed, exercising and playing sports, praying or attending religious services, reading, listening to music, spending time with loved ones, getting a massage, meditating or doing yoga, going for a walk, or anything like any of those are wonderful stress coping mechanisms. To tap into your body's relaxation response, try slowing down your breath to 4 to 6 minutes or breaths per minute. As it said in the video, this activates your prefrontal cortex and increases your heart variability, giving you a chance to put out an impulsive fire before it even gets out of control. So, in conclusion, willpower is essentially the combination of us using our self-control to navigate towards our long-term ambitions. We all can make conscious decisions, effortful ones that lead us towards our goal, and it's okay if we make bad ones that lead us away from our goal. Everyone's imperfect, and shaming and guilt can actually lead to further damaging your willpower. There are so many ways to strengthen our willpower and recharge it. Long story short, if we clear away the fire hazards where we can, test our smoke alarm and make sure that it's working, and we make sure our fire extinguisher is full and ready, we will be better prepared to put out any fires when they pop up. And with that said, I would like to play a quick video to close us out from the human personification of willpower, Mr. David Goggins. But before I go into that, I just want to say, one, I know this was a little long. I wanted to make it longer because of missing last Wednesday, because, again, the whole insurrection and whatnot. And if you like this, I will be back next Wednesday with another Willpower Wednesday. That one will actually be a half-hour story about willpower, someone having it, someone executing it, what have you. If you really liked this, I go on 4 other days of the week. That is Try Friday, or I'm sorry, Thoughtful Thursday being tomorrow, which is where I talk about history, a smart person, and something cool in tech going on. Try Friday, which is my book club. We're finishing up part 1 of Salem's Lot this coming Friday, so if that sounds interesting to you, catch up and come and discuss it with me. Then Saturday, we're doing Weekend Deep End, half-hour deep dive on a random subject of my choosing. And then on Monday, I will be back, even though I missed this Monday, with another Music Monday, where I do a brief bio, an interesting instrument, and a music moment of the week. All of those, I go from 6 to 6:30. I know that it's almost 7 right now. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
I'm a big believer in doing things that make you uncomfortable. So we live in a world that we want to be as comfortable as we can. And we wonder why we have no growth. We wonder why when the smallest thing in our life gets difficult, we wonder why we cower and we run away. Because we are kind of living our whole life is set up that way. Our whole life is set up in the path of least resistance. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to feel discomfort. So the whole time, we're living our lives in a very comfortable area. There's no growth in that. So for me, I realized that. The reason I became 297 pounds is because that was comfortable. What was very uncomfortable was running. What was very uncomfortable was being on a diet. What was very uncomfortable was trying to face things that I didn't want to face. And I also realized when I was really big, I had no growth. Why? Because I was living comfortable. So I realized for me to find growth, I had to face all of these different things that made me very, very uncomfortable. One thing I faced was running. I absolutely hated running. But I knew for me to grow, I had to do this thing every single day. I wanted to start callousing my mind. I wanted to start becoming a better person. And how you become a better person, how you gain mental toughness, how you become the person you want to be, is constantly facing the things that you don't want to face. If you constantly run away from things that you don't want to face, how is there growth? How is there mental toughness? I can give you a class all day long about self-talk, visualization, eat an elephant one bite at a time. But if you're never putting yourself in a situation to actually practice these things, you're never going to grow. I can't put you out there we're all going through a battle in our mind. A warrior is not a person that carries a gun. The biggest war you ever go through is right between your own ears. It's in your mind. We're all going through a war in our mind, and we have to callous our mind to fight that war and to win that war. So, one example I can give you about callousing your mind, about doing things that make you uncomfortable. There's a book out there called Lone Survivor, and there's a guy named Marcus Luttrell. He was on an operation where a bunch of guys died, and I knew all the guys that died, and I know Marcus Luttrell very well. This story touched my heart, and I basically went out there, found a foundation to raise money for it, called the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. You give 100% tuition for, let's say your dad died in the war. He was a special operator. If that guy had a kid, you get 100% tuition to go to college. Great foundation, great people working at the foundation. I'm going to do this. So I Googled the 10 hardest races in the world. And at this time in my life, I was not a runner. I maybe ran 10 miles the whole year. I was into bodybuilding, I was into weight training, and that's what I did. So I Googled the 10 hardest races in the world, and what came up, number one, was this race called the Badwater 135. It's a 135-mile race through Death Valley in the summertime. So I wanted to get in this race. I thought it was actually a stage race. I thought it was a race where you ran like 20 miles, set up a camp, and then ran 20 miles the next day. I didn't know people ran 100 miles, 135 miles at one time. You know, I know it's even possible. I had never even run a marathon. So I called the race director up. His name was Chris Kosman. And I called him up on a Wednesday. And this is in November. He said, David, to qualify for my race, you have to do 100 miles. And I said, 100 miles in a calendar year? I didn't know what was going on. He said, no, 100 miles in 24 hours or less. And I thought that was humanly impossible. He said, so you got to do that in 24 hours or less for me to consider you in my race. He goes, there's a race on Saturday. And I called him up on Wednesday. It was that 4 days for me to get ready for this race. And I run 10 miles the whole year. And so he said, if you qualify, if you do 100 miles, 24 hours or less, I might consider you in my race. So 4 days later, I'm out there in San Diego, and the race was called the San Diego One Day, where you run around a 24 or around a 1 mile track for 24 hours to see how many miles you can get. And so I go out there. I didn't know what I was doing. I had mild plates and Ritz crackers, and I had a blue lawn chair. That's all I had. And I was going to see my crew person every single mile. And I was going to drink Mileplex and have a Ritz cracker. They had no water, had nothing. Went out there, got to mile 20, wasn't feeling too bad. Around mile 30, I started feeling my shins starting to get extremely sore. And I started to develop stress fractures, shin splints. I started feeling the metatarsals in my feet starting to break at around mile 50. By mile 70, I was totally destroyed. And I sat down in this blue lawn chair, and I was destroyed. And when a bigger person sits down, I don't know exactly how much I weighed, but I was extremely big. I was a power lifter, lifted a lot of weights, and I was not an endurance athlete by any means. So I sat down in this blue lawn chair, looked at my crew person, and I literally couldn't stand up. I was destroyed, and I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't stand up to go to the bathroom. So I sat there, and I went to the bathroom myself. I was destroyed, and I was discolored, I was pale, I was dizzy, lightheaded, I was in the worst shape of my entire life. I've been in 3 Hell Weeks, Ranger School, all these different training programs, and this was the worst situation I've been in my entire life. I thought I was literally dying. And all I could think about was, how can I get out of this chair? I have 30 miles to go. And everything I had gone through, I realized that the human mind, if you can put it in a very quiet, calm place and get it to calm down and not be so spastic, that you could possibly make this work out for you. How bad are you really? So I calmed myself down, and I had to make this enormous thing small. I had 30 more miles to run, and my body was in the worst shape in my entire life, the worst pain I ever felt in my life. So I broke this 30 miles thing down. I broke it down to small chunks. I calmed my mind down. I had to get water, had to get potassium, had to get sodium. I had to stop being so dizzy because I had to be able to stand up. So my dizziness went away after about an hour. I was able to stand up now. And I was going around this track at like 30-some minute mile. And I'll never forget my crew person saying, hey, I got to mile 81. They said, you're not going to make the time. I had 24 hours, and I was going so slow, taking so much time. This is when I realized that the human mind, once everything gets connected, once the mind knows you're not going to quit something, it's going to try to find more. It's going to try to give you more. Once it realizes you're not going to take the path of least resistance, you're going to stay here until it's done. My mind and my body and my spirit became one for the first time ever. For the first time ever, it became one. And I went to a level that I never thought was humanly possible for myself or anybody else. In that shape that I was in, I was able to run 19 miles. And I ran 19 miles, did 100 miles, I actually did one more mile. I did 101 miles in 18 hours and 56 minutes. I'd overcome so many obstacles in my life, and this was the final crucible for me. And I got through it. And at the end of this race was such clarity to me. And it was just the most amazing thing I ever do in my life.